Hello investors, welcome back. In the first video in this series, we covered springing guarantees and exploding guarantees. In this video, we'll cover recognizing bad boy carve-out language. Although you should always retain competent legal counsel in every commercial real estate transaction, it remains essential that you as the borrower in such a transaction are able to recognize language that can result in springing recourse. Here is a partial guide to help you understand the situations under which a lender may pursue personal recourse in an otherwise non-recourse loan. Generally, you'll find springing guarantee language in the promissory note, although there are some examples where the operative language is to be found in the mortgage document or in some other document in the loan package. You'll generally want to look for language that begins with something like, "The loan shall be full recourse to borrower and guarantors in the event of." We'll start with some useful terminology. Borrower means exactly what you would expect it to. This is the entity, usually an LLC, that is responsible for repaying the loan. Often the borrowers lack the net worth requirements on their own and will ask a guarantor with a large net worth to guarantee the loan in the event of a default. The guarantor should be free from liability, assuming that none of the conditions in any springing guarantee prevail, and that borrowers diffuse any exploding guarantee through cooperation with the lender in the event of a default. Now, if it sounds like being a guarantee on a loan is a dangerous business, that's because it is. You don't want to take on this role unless you are a thoroughly sophisticated investor so as to be fully aware of the dangers, know the parties well, and have the benefit of the advice of competent legal counsel. Now, that sounds like a mouthful. You may want to check out the previous video in this series for a refresher. Okay. Now, the first type of bad boy carve-out or springing guarantee we'll cover is voluntary bankruptcy. You'll see language which, again, will begin with something like, "The loan shall be fully recourse to the borrower and any guarantors if any of the one or more of the following occur," such as, for example, the occurrence of a bankruptcy event, etc. You may also see terminology to the effect that if you acknowledge in writing that you are unable to pay the loan, that may trigger springing recourse. There may be additional language stating that a bankruptcy must be dismissed within a defined period, such as 90 days. Watch out. As stated before, I'm not a lawyer, but any of the above provisions in a loan document would cause me to think twice about signing these loan documents. I can't tell you what to do. These are simply my impressions and my views. This video is presented for informational purposes only, and I can't be held liable for any damages that may result for using information or following the opinions presented in this video. The second type of springing guarantee we'll cover is failure to maintain special purpose entity status. So, as usual, start looking for language that begins with "loan shall be full recourse," etc., or something to that effect. Then you may see something like "any failure by the borrower to comply with any of the single asset entity requirements of this loan agreement," etc., etc. Now notice it may say special purpose entity or single asset entity requirements. As mentioned in the prior video, the idea here is that the lender wants you to protect their asset or their collateral from anything that may go wrong in any of your other business dealings or in your personal life. Okay, this is also good from your own standpoint. So even if you are using seller financing, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you go to the very small expense of setting up an LLC so that you can protect yourself. Next, we'll cover fraud. As usual, look for something to the effect of that recourse may be triggered in the presence of ... fraud, written material misrepresentation, or material omission by the borrower, guarantor, key principal. Usually they list many other types of individual that may be part of the transaction, such as the officers at your company, in the application. So if you applied for credit under some false pretense, misrepresented yourself, this is fraud for property, and you should expect serious consequences, including personal recourse. Next, we'll cover opposition to foreclosure. Usually the documents will mention something along the lines of an enforcement action. Basically, that means the lender coming for their money. And injunction or judicial intervention. In other words, if you do any of the above, such as ask for an injunction or some sort of judicial intervention, that means that your lender is going to incur some expenses, and they may not want only to recover those expenses, but they may as well wish to recover any and all losses and may actually trigger, recourse for the entire loan amount. Moral of the story is you may not want to sue your lender. Again, you're going to want to consult competent legal counsel. All right. The whole idea behind this video is to keep your head on a swivel. You're going to want to be very careful when you read the mortgage documents, the notes, and other documents in the package, and you're going to have to peruse all these documents for recourse language. So let's talk about some other documents that may trigger recourse. For example, you may have an environmental indemnity. As always, you want to know that your legal team is key to protecting you. However, you're going to need to know what questions to ask, and this is why it's important that you peruse the documents and that you have a certain degree of sophistication so that you can make sure you're asking the right questions. So, one thing you might want to know is whether the environmental indemnity is considered a loan document. Depending on your state, loan obligations may be extinguished upon foreclosure. That is to say, you may have non-recourse in such states following the foreclosure. In other words, they may be limited to simply taking back the property. Now, I've been advised that this is the case in Washington State. So in states such as this, the lender may want you to sign some sort of a waiver, maybe including some language in the environmental indemnity indicating that this is not a loan document. Well, if you are asked to sign such a document, the upshot is that this document will survive foreclosure, even in such states in which otherwise loan documents would not, and you may find yourself in a recourse situation even though the loan was otherwise non-recourse. Something to understand is that environmental liability is no joke. Often the entity required to pay for environmental damage is not the individual or entity that caused the damage in the first place. In fact, to my understanding, it's always the current owner and borrower who are called upon to pay. And you may find out that 50 years ago there was a dry cleaner or a gas station 3 doors down, and that an underground tank has leaked, and that affects your property. So this can be very, very expensive, and lenders like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac will actually require, depending on the size of the property, they're going to require at least a phase 1 environmental assessment, which actually tends to be rather cheap, and it's helpful. It protects you. It gives you an idea as to whether it's likely that there is any environmental damage. And if there's a likelihood, they may order a phase 2. Again, this video is presented for informational purposes only. Consult a legal professional in all commercial real estate transactions, and do your own due diligence. Thank you for joining us, investors, and we'll see you on the flip side.